Welcome everyone to the Performance and Capacity stream. For this session, we have Butch Rambish from 21st Century Software, who is covering for Dan Ruel as he's unable to make this session. This session is 6AC, so we ask that you leave feedback for this session. There might be some issues when you are leaving feedback, but please do try, as I'm being told that they should be resolved by now. I'll leave a link to the feedback form in the chat box. Also, we ask that you donate to a nominated charity, which is Guide Dogs for the Blind and also RNLI. I'll leave a link in the chat box for that as well. For question and answers, if you want to just feel free to put in any questions you want in the chat box, and Butch will get to them towards the end. So without further ado, Rich, I will pass it over to you.
Thanks. Again, my name is Butch. I've been with 21st Century for a little over a year and a half, and prior to that, I was with IBM for almost 17 years. But I've been in the space around capacity and performance and cost management since the late 1970s. So been around it a while. Yes, I have pretty gray hair, but I hope to do Dan's presentation justice. If it's a little choppy, I apologize, but it's always a challenge when you're doing somebody else's presentation. But we're going to take a look at capacity management as a discipline. And so as we talk about it as a discipline, not an activity, not an action, but as a discipline, we're really looking at making it a mature process. And a mature process simply means aligning your capacity of your environment to your performance, the performance levels that are required by your organization, whatever those service level objectives or agreements are, whether they be formal or informal, whether they be dictated by external organizations, whatever those performance objectives are, they come at a cost, and that cost and capacity and performance, you want to make sure those are aligned so that your IT part of your business is truly a profitable contributing to the success of the business. So we're going to look at how we do that alignment, and we're going to look at some of the audiences within your organization that might be using the data, and we'll just go through kind of the capacity management process necessary to meet those goals. So kind of a little of agenda. We're going to talk about process and tools. We'll talk about the audience. We'll talk about some of the inputs to the process and forecasting, and we'll talk a little bit about reporting. Now, one of the challenges for most IT organizations is the fact that it has changed dramatically. The mainframe is still the mainframe in many ways. I took 8 years out of IT doing something different, and I came back and everything was right where I left it in some respects. But other respects, I look around and I see the way things are being done, both internally in the IT environment, as well as externally, how businesses are using IT. And it's changed dramatically. The hybrid cloud frameworks, they're less predictable. Back in the early days of my career and on through probably the first 20, 30 years, I could go to any data center or talk to any capacity planner, performance analyst, or whatever, and look at the charts of their business, and you'd see the typical hump in the morning and a hump in the afternoon, because most of the users were internal. They came in, they worked 8 to 5. They would come in, they would get logged on to CICS, TSO, IMS, whatever it might be. They did their work, they'd take a lunch break, they'd come back, they'd do some more work, and then they'd leave at the end of the day. And our capacity planning really was dealing with those two humps. That's not indicative of most businesses these days. No longer is it simply a two-hump day. Organizations have outward-facing applications. Customers can log in and look at their own accounts. They can do trades online. They can buy things at midnight and say when they want to have it shipped. They can go into their utility account and pay their utility bill whenever they want to. All of those kind of things have changed dramatically how we do capacity management. It's and change the way that we predict performance. And organizations IT is now front facing for almost every area of the marketplace, whether it be a bank or a retail or utility. It really doesn't matter. IT is front facing now. Customers directly interface with the computing network. And that wasn't true in the early days, when a lot of the capacity management applications and reporting were first developed. And so a lot of the homegrown capacity tools in place have been around for 30 or 40 years. And the expertise that was used to develop those in many cases is disappearing, people retiring, moving on to other positions. And there aren't as many people coming in with the skill set and the expertise. So that's one of the challenges that faces a lot of organizations is just having a skill set there to maintain a homegrown capacity planning environment. And there's a lot of other challenges on here. Incident and problem and change is one that's often overlooked in the scope of performance and capacity planning. But having the information there to analyze and solve an incident, understand what the problem is, understand what the change is, and how it's going to impact the organization. Often the difference between an incident and a catastrophe is really a matter of time. And so having data available in a timely manner to be able to analyze and solve those kind of performance problems is critical. So what we're going to be looking at as we go through this is we're going to be looking at the balance and really, if you think about it, I can deliver the best performance by just throwing a lot of hardware at it, but that comes at a significant cost. How does that line up with the business? And so really capacity management is the interlocking of these three disciplines and trying to find that sweet spot where I'm delivering the level of performance that my business demands, that my customers are going to have a positive experience interacting with my company, and having the capacity in order to do that at the right cost. So in the end, when business management looks at IT, they see it as a valuable contributor to the business. So as we look at the process, I mean, there's a lot of things that have to take place. You're going to have to analyze your current capacity, and you're analyzing current capacity in the scope of understanding my performance objectives. So I need to be able to one, analyze and report on those performance objectives. I need to be able to document the business events. It's no longer just a matter of starting up the computer and things running, and I don't really have to worry about things, but I need to know about marketing events for the company. Did they do an advertising campaign? Is there a particular day when I can expect more people to come on, and how do I plan the performance for that day if in fact I'm expecting a large increase? Here in the U.S. We have what's called Black Friday. You probably have all heard of it. It's the day after our Thanksgiving holiday. Thanksgiving is always on a Thursday. And so the Friday after Thanksgiving, everybody has off. And that's traditionally the day everybody goes shopping. And it is now manifested into an internet shopping day as well. And so every retail business plans for Black Friday. A lot of organizations around the world have similar type holidays they have to deal with. How do you plan for that? How do you make sure that you have the right resources available? And the same is true for cost. We have a lot of changes in the business in terms of different hardware that's available, how we can buy the hardware. Now we can have standby CPUs. We don't pay for them unless we turn them on. But when we turn them on, there's a cost associated with it. We have contract obligations for our software, whether it be a rolling 4-hour average or a tailor fit pricing. All of these kind of contractual obligations allow us some flexibility, but we need to be able to manage it. We need to understand how are we performing against the cost of those contracts. We also need to understand things like our application development cycle and what new applications are coming online. Did we buy a new application? How do I test and prepare for that? And so all of this process to align these is important, and that's what we're going to talk more about. Now, as I mentioned, companies have been doing this since, well, I've been involved with it since the mid 1970s. And typically we take all of our systems consumption metrics and we bring those in at midnight. We typically think of our SMF and RMF data because that's our probably our single largest source of data for this in the mainframe environment. We take our SMF data, cut it off at midnight, and somewhere after midnight, we start running our batch jobs, and they'll run all night long for most companies. We load in our performance training database. Then we can start doing our statistical analytics and then begin to deliver reports. And that's really the process we've been dealing with for many, many years. And because of the volume of data, it's become quite challenging. A lot of companies could no longer process all of their data in a single batch job. So now they had to put in some new batch jobs to split out different parts, and then they run multiple batch jobs to collect the data and get it in. But in all likelihood, even those run a long time. And one of the other challenges is if you have an incident at 10 o'clock this morning, well, guess what? The data for looking at that in terms of the SMF data is not going to be available till like 24 hours later or close to it. And so there's a challenge in terms of timeliness with the current process. You got your history, you're going to keep a certain amount of data online. Usually it's summarized to weekly or monthly level, so you can have enough data. You process your current data. And what's really needed is now what we call a near real-time collection process. And that is where we can actually get the data, process it as it's being created, and update it to the database. And the near real-time collection, the real value proposition there for customers is to be able to see performance data within minutes instead of waiting 24 hours. And so by implementing a near real-time collection, it helps to be more proactive with your performance analysis. It then gives you resource consumption measures almost immediately. One of the other data sources that or key inputs are going to be non-historical type data from the business end. What acquisitions are planned? Obviously there's times when they can't tell you about acquisitions, but once it's been announced, how do we plan for that? Maybe the acquisition is buying our major competitor, so it's a merger of equals. Well, that's a fact. How are we going to do that? What's the capacity implications? Maybe we're buying a small competitor and we're just absorbing that. That's a different type of analysis. And then we have business forecasts. We can take and look at our historical data, and we can do a linear regression and say, hey, I'm growing at 10%, and we can plan for 10%. But if we don't also understand that there are business executives out there that are planning new ventures, where they're planning new branches, for example, how do I take that information, that non-technical information, and apply it to my capacity management process? All of that type of data is necessary to bring into the capacity management process to be proactive and to represent what the business is looking for. Curation is the process whereby we take the raw data and we read that data in, and we do some curation. We do some manipulation of the data. Some of the manipulation may be getting rid of some of the noise. If anybody's familiar with SMF records and looked at them, there are, depending on the record type, there can be over 100 elements in each record, sometimes way over 100 elements. Back in the 70s, we just read the whole record and stored it. And then we might summarize some of the data up to a higher level of summarization, daily, weekly, or monthly, but we still kept everything. And the reality is we didn't use everything. We only used a small subset. So curation is a process where we can become more efficient. We can begin to weed out the noise and focus on what we really need to do our job. And so that curation process does calculations. It eliminates as I said, the noise, and then it also does summarization of the data. So we can then begin to analyze our service levels. We can understand the cost and scalability of our process. As we do the curation, of course, we need to be able to understand peaks. Anybody that's been doing capacity planning for any length of time knows that peaks are what you are really planning around. I need to know what those peaks are, because at the peak usage, I need to be sure I can deliver the level of performance that the business requires. I need to be able to do some exception reporting against that performance. If I'm missing my objectives, where am I missing them? What are the contributors to missing them, and how do I analyze that? And then going into the future, I need to be proactive in terms of capacity recommendations. I need to automate that process as much as possible, so it doesn't become a one-off event to do forecasting and studies, but really it's a form of reporting that's readily available to myself as a capacity planner, or to management if they need to check in and kind of see how things are done. There's always going to be those special studies and other things that you do, and you want to have the data available for those. But a lot of the data, the trending and other things are valuable as just a normal reporting vehicle, and they help to visualize and show management where we are, where we've come from, and where we're going, just to understand that. And then the application project lifecycle, I'm going to talk more about that in a little while, but it's often overlooked in capacity planning, and new applications come online and the system grinds to a halt, and all of a sudden somebody's scrambling, trying to figure out, why, how did that impact it? And the implementation becomes a post-mortem more than a celebration. So part of that is can be addressed by including your project lifecycle for new applications and new versions of applications in your capacity management. One of the things that's true of the capacity management process is there's a lot of people that can be involved in it at various levels. Obviously, you have the really deep technical team, the capacity planners, your performance analysts, your operations team. These people need very detailed information. They need the raw data. In some respects, they need to be able to see down to a transaction level sometimes, but very technical in nature. Application development engineers, their view of the data is going to be a little bit different, and the data source needs to be able to be summarized and viewed at an application level, not just a transaction level, but an application level. And then management, IT management is looking at things like, hardware, where are we in our utilization of the hardware, where are we in our contracts for software, what's the overall cost. And then of course, business management's view of the data is, they don't want to see CPU seconds or things of that nature. They want to see how it's contributing to the overall business. So the collection process, we want to have it as automated as much as possible. So the automated collection, we basically have this thing running. If we can do the near real-time collection, that process is running throughout the day. It's getting the data, it's curating it. We need to understand what the key data is. We don't want to store the entire record. If we do store the entire record, we're going to chew up a lot of our disk, our DASD space can be chewed up quite quickly with it. But we want the data to be curated and aggregated. We want to keep a few days worth of detailed or timestamp type data. But we want to be able to have many days worth of data, or many weeks and months worth of data. So this whole process needs to be automated, and there needs to be a timeliness to it so that we have access to the data in a short period of time. So, and then we get into the data visualization, and data visualization simply, we're talking about the reporting mechanism, whether it's online reporting or actual printed reports, which I'm not sure how many people still do printed reports, but the visualization of the data is really audience dependent. And the audience, whether they're the technical people that need tabular reports, or it's a business aligned business side, and they really just want a nice picture they can put on the, that they can bring up on the screen and quickly see where they are. But the business language and technical language kind of spans that spectrum, and depending on the audience, the level of detail in the report will change, and the type of language will change. So let's talk a little bit about predicting, and this is one of the things when people think of capacity planning or capacity management, almost everybody thinks of forecasting, predicting kind of where we're going to be, what's the next box, what's when are we going to run out of capacity, those kind of things. And it's never as easy as this tic-tac-toe game. Obviously the O player here has got the game won. It doesn't matter what X does, O is going to win. But that's not, predicting the business service levels is not that easy. It's a challenging venture. I mentioned earlier, new applications can come online, new functions. There could be defects in the application. All of those things can have a significant impact. We have, of course, our infrastructure, the software, the hardware, scheduling system. All of these things are feeding. The scheduling system is feeding jobs into the system. We're bringing on new software. We've got hardware we've got to plan for. And then we, of course, have the business side of it, and that's understanding things like market promotions, something in the news. It could be government regulation that causes some impact. In order to be to meet the auditors, we have to do certain things. All of these things contribute to a complexity for predicting the future. All of these things bring in different kinds of elements of surprise for the capacity planner. Talking about the applications, when you look at an application coming online, and a lot of times it's not just the ones that are developed in-house, but sometimes it's applications that are purchased from outside. But whenever they're brought in, there's typically some a process for bringing those in. You're doing things like stress testing, maybe some code reviews. Whatever the process is, most organizations have a process, and the idea with capacity planning to be able to successfully absorb that new application and make sure that it's delivering as expected involves getting access to and measuring this system as early as possible. This is kind of a time chart here, and if you wait until you get to stress testing and production, if you're at that point and you start looking at the system, you don't have a lot of time to react. If you can begin to get in early, either identifying a similar application that you can use to start doing some projections, or even at the build and testing level to begin to analyze the performance of particular programs and transactions, various systems, so you can then begin to project and say, well, if we do, 1 million of these transactions a day, here's what we can expect in terms of growth or usage of our hardware. And of course, there's a lot of metrics. You need to understand not just the CPU usage, but also IO and other processes, so you can begin to be prepared for when that application comes online. So that when you get to stress testing and production, you're not doing a post-mortem, but you're doing a celebration, because you've been able to help out in the application lifecycle, identifying potential problems before they hit the production environment. The workload consumption measures, really, we're just looking at all of the different things in terms of a cycle. All of the development influences, the applications are going to use a certain amount of CPU time. We need to project for our workload consumption. We need to be able to apply some counts, some number of transactions, those kind of things. And we need to be able to understand all of these different technical aspects in order to project across our hardware spectrum, what are the requirements going to be, and how is it going to impact not just the hardware utilization, but are there going to be some interactions and other impacts to other workloads in our environment? Talked a little bit about business executives and talking, understanding, how do we talk in business terms when we're talking about our technology. And one of the things that we talk about is natural forecasting units. So it's easy to, as I said, to look back at the wake of the ship and project and say we're growing our CPU at 10% or 15% or whatever it might be. But can I express that in a term that a management's going to understand? If I'm Coca-Cola Corporation, how do I express the amount of CPU utilization in terms of beverages sold? Maybe it's each time I open up a new account in a bank, it's certain number of service units. So being able to express not only express utilization in those terms, but also project in the future. So if I talk to a business executive and he tells me we're going to sell 20% more beverages, if I'm Coca-Cola, our beverage sales are going to go up by 20%. I can then begin to back that in and say, okay, here's how I project it's going to impact the environment. That's a great thing to do. It's not always that easy. It takes a lot of analysis. You have to do some historical analysis and some correlation of business statistics along with the technical statistics to begin to get an idea how to express that. But once you've done that analysis, it really is a useful tool that helps to make that translation from technical to business. And it goes a long way for credibility for the capacity management process. Predicting the future, obviously, as I've been talking about, you can easily steer by the wake. That's what we used to say. You're basically looking backwards and projecting based on that. The problem is you don't see what's in front of you, and that's where those natural forecasting units and other things allow us to then come in and do some kind of workload simulation where not only do we take our historical view, but then we can add on to it and say, well, this workload I expect to grow at 10%. This one grows at 15%. This workload is going away, but we're adding this new one. Those kind of things are needed for predicting the future. You also need to be able to predict your software future costs. This is a picture of some reports that were produced for managing tailor fit pricing. So I know what my I have 2 container contracts, one for 8 million and one for 9 million. They each have a beginning and an end date. How am I performing against that contract? Am I going to exceed it before the contract date is up? If so, when am I going to exceed it? I need to be able to analyze the utilization of the resources for that contract. I need to be able to show management, where am I spending that? If I'm projecting I'm going to run out at a certain time, which of our systems are driving that? Not only which of the systems, but I need to be able to drill down even into the workloads. What kind of workloads is driving it, what applications, so that I can allow management then to be able to make some decisions. So here's a forecast projecting when we'll run out. It's not up to us to say, what's good and what's bad. It's really a business decision, but we need to provide business and IT management with the information they need so they can understand how that's going. They may come back to us and say, hey, we've got to make some changes. We've got to stretch that out a little bit. Maybe we're going to curtail certain activities. And so we need to know what those activities are and how can we curtail them? Maybe we move them to another platform. Maybe we move them to a system that is not as constrained. So we need to be able to have that information to help management to make those decisions. The predicting the future costs, we need to be able to mirror that back to the business. We need to be able to talk to not only to the technicians, but to the business and application teams and understand how the future predictions are going to impact our various applications and the performance of those applications. And I need to be able to, look at if we have a chargeback process, I need to be able to incorporate that into our chargeback process. So we're going to look a little more into the types of reports that are useful. looking at, kind of looking back as well as looking current and future. One of the things that has been a challenge in the business of capacity planning is the capacity planner not only is hired or charged with having the expertise to do the planning, but in many cases, he's the only one that knows the data sources. He may be the only one that knows the language of the reporting language. And so he becomes a report writer for most of the company. And it's quite expensive to take one of your skilled people and make them into a glorified report writer. Self-service reporting is really an avenue for success. It frees your capacity planner up to spend time analyzing data, not writing reports. And so having a self-service reporting tool where people can view reports that are generated automatically, they can have reports delivered to them on a regular basis. And when they identify an anomaly, the tool provides an easy way for drilling down and seeing more detail. The breadth of the reports, things like CPU and ZIP and tailor fit pricing, rolling 4-hour average, your breadth of reporting needs to cover what your organization's needs are and the various audience. Your CICS system programmers need access to good data for CICS. The same is true for your ZOS performance guy. He needs to understand the LPARs and the various systems and see how things are progressing. You need to have some intelligence in the reporting that allows to do some profiling. You need to be able to see what your profile is for your environment. I talked earlier about the old 2-hump picture. Every shop had a picture that looked very similar. That's not true today, and you need a tool that statistically can begin to visualize the profile for your environment. One of the things that I see a lot as I talk to customers is almost every customer, you can take every Monday and Monday to Monday to Monday to Monday, they all look very similar. So the patterns have somewhat changed, but the days typically look the same. And so profiling by hour, by day allows us to begin to see, and after a while, we can look at some pictures and say, wait a minute, that doesn't look right. And now we can take that picture and do some analysis, drill down and see what's going on. Capacity, performance, and cost, whether it's your disk storage or your CICS or IMS, you need to be able to do some analysis. The tool's a great place to capture information from things like RACF, where you can track and have exception reporting on access failures, look at things like ZOS Connect data. There are a lot of different types of data that come in, and you need to have the breadth of data and the breadth of delivery to be able to deliver it. And of course, dashboards are very popular and they're useful because in one screen, you can very quickly see how we're performing. When you become familiar with your environment, these dashboards really become the red light, yellow light, green light. You can almost look at it in an instant and say, oh, okay, yeah, yesterday was a good day. You don't really have to bore into each picture. You can visually see very quickly how you're performing. So when you get the anomaly, I've got a spike and I need to find out why there's a spike at this point in time. I need to have the ability to click, have drill downs. So, or I don't want to have to go back and find another report. Oh, how do I run this report? Change the parameters. I want to be, from this report, be able to click on that blue hyperlink and then see what's going on underneath that. Okay, underneath that, here's the LPARs. And now I can see a particular LPAR and I want to see what happened with that LPAR. I can click on the blue LPAR name link on the tabular report below. And now I can begin to drill down into that particular LPAR. And then from there, I can drill down and see workloads. That's the type of capability that your users need to be productive. So they don't have to come back and say, oh, can you run this report for me? Or, oh, where can I find this report? Oh, I need to get more detail. It's all driven, from one report to the next. And so that kind of automation and drill down capability provides value to your audience that's looking at the data, and they can get these reports very quickly. It takes pressure off of the capacity planning team. They're not being called on to write reports, and the tool can actually be, if you have the right tool, you can actually fill in filters, and the user can pull in additional data that they want without requiring somebody to write another report or run a report for them. And again, we just keep going down. We need to be able to go from the highest level, looking at our overall utilization. We need to be able to get all the way down to service classes, be able to see our service classes, and eventually get down to jobs. We're going to get down to the actual job level. So we need to be able to have a database and a curation system that allows us to take information from RMF, for example, and be able to go from RMF type data and drill all the way down to where we're really looking at data that came from SMF type 30s, and know that we've correlated this in the right time frame, and we can begin to do some root cause analysis when we have things like spikes or other problems. Same is true for our CICS and IMS regions. We've got the dashboard picture right here on the screen. Our CICS team needs to have the same capability. They need to be able to see very quickly when they have some kind of exception to what's normal, spike in terms of the number of transactions or CPU utilization, whatever it might be. And they need to be able to drill down and see what caused the spikes. And they need to be able to get down to a transaction level. They need to get down and to be able to see which transactions are driving that. So our curation process has to support enough detail that allows us to see this kind of data, but at the same time, our curation process and storing of data can't overwhelm our environment. We can't have a capacity planning database, a performance database that is so big that it just overwhelms the environment. So we need a smart curation process that trims down the data so that we can keep enough detailed data to provide this level of analysis for root cause view. And of course, we need to be able to not only present the data in pictures, but we need to present it in tabular form so that analysts can look at the data. I typically don't do scientific notation, but the tool should be able to present the data in a format that is natural for the person reading the data. One of the things that is true in almost every data center is the volume of information that's being processed is tremendous, and it's hard to have enough people to look at everything. And so one of the things that's popular is to manage by exception. And that is, no news is good news, right? If everything's running along fine, I don't need to spend an hour looking at reports to know that everything is green, that everything is working fine. So managing by exception simply means I can set within the tool certain exception conditions that will notify me when I've exceeded those exceptions. And then I know, okay, now I have something I need to take a look at. I can have exceptions like channel busy or workload manager performance indexes to, I'm exceeding it or I'm not meeting it. Maybe CPU utilization over certain percentage, I want to be notified. Those kind of exceptions, those are fixed exceptions, and they're useful to manage against those and be alerted when you exceed those. But one of the things that you need to be able to do, exceptions, if I'm looking at data from 24 hours ago, it's a little late to be worried about that exception. Exception management really only works if you can get real-time or near real-time SMF collection. If I'm looking at data that's just a couple minutes old, it's relevant and it warrants action. I need to be able to see that and look at that. I need to be able to maybe drive some automation off of it. If I'm doing it within a minute or two and I've got a CPU utilization, maybe I do some automation to bring a CPU, a backup CPU online at certain levels. Whatever that might be, only makes sense if I'm collecting data in a near real-time fashion. If I'm collecting it near real-time fashion, these exceptions can be acted on and in near real-time as well. Now, those were fixed thresholds. One of the things that a lot of organizations are looking to do is to apply computer learning, AI, to these types of processes. And by doing that, we can then begin to have dynamic thresholds. And a dynamic threshold really is a threshold that is based more on your normal patterns. So I talked earlier about having the ability to build profiles of your usage, understand what 10 o'clock on Mondays typically looks like. What does 2 in the afternoon look like on Tuesdays? Those kind of profiles, so that my thresholding can then look at those profiles and look at my utilization and notify me when I'm really out of bounds by 1 or 2 standard deviations. And I can then begin to look and say, okay, what's going on here? Why is this particular hour or this particular time period out of bounds? So dynamic thresholding is really kind of a wave of the future to apply computer learning to allow you to be more have more intelligence in the exception reporting. So I kind of talked about this before. It really is a process. Capacity management, it's not a one and done. This is not something that you're going to go and do a study once every month or once every quarter or once a year, but it really is designed to be a continuous process where you're collecting data daily or continuously. You're talking to business executives, you're working with your application teams to understand new applications that are coming online. How do I measure those? And how do I convey that back to development? Getting people to plug into the process, so you're not just sending information out, but you need to be getting a lot of information in. And it really is making everybody a part of the team for capacity management. It helps to get credibility within the organization when you can present the information that is relative to what they're doing. And in a way that helps them to do their job, and they feel they're contributing to the overall success of the IT organization. That concludes the presentation, and I don't know if we have any questions out there.
No, none at the minute, but just a reminder to everyone, if you have got a question or any thoughts or comments you want to share, just feel free to put it in the chat box. We can just give it a few minutes just to allow people to ask any questions.
Sure. When everybody I will say when everybody else gets the deck, Dan's email is on there. Dan loves this kind of stuff and would gladly entertain questions. You can always reach out to Dan by way of email, and I know he would love to respond to any questions if people have them after the fact.
Yep, so that's I don't think we've got any questions coming in, but that's brilliant. At least people know how they can get in touch with you.
A lot of people don't like to type the question. They don't like to ask questions in a public forum, and they don't like to type them either. So we're here to answer questions, and we're glad to take those.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So yeah, with that in mind, I think we can conclude this presentation. And thanks very much for your time, Bush. It was really informative. And if people can donate to the nominated charity, that would be brilliant. It does give you the chance to enter the prize raffle as well. So that's the only way of getting your hands on any of the exciting prizes that GSE are offering this year. And yeah, please do remember to leave session feedback, and the session is 6AC. We will be back in here tomorrow at midday, that's UK time, where we'll have a presentation on tailored fit pricing. So thank you all so much for your time and for tuning in today. And thank you to Butch as well for stepping in for Dan and for presenting.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.